Uh, that way I can upload it to YouTube and share it to everybody else. Um, what we wanted to talk about today were some of the new features, which is really one main new feature. Um, but Dawn is going to cover some of the access mechanisms that we have for Academic Writer. Um, and then I'm going to cover references, learning about references in Academic Writer, building your reference library, importing references. Um, I know not everybody is in Academic Writer all the time, so I like to add in a little refresher to these sessions. It can be helpful. And at any time, feel free to just raise your hand if you have a question or if you do something that I'm not talking about or Don's not talking about. Um, Feel free to drop it in the chat. I always love to hear how people are using Academic Writer because then I can pass it along to other people. That way, we build a community of users and shared knowledge. I will go off camera while we're sharing screens, so that way when I post the recording, it's not me right in the top corner as we're going over the content. Um, so if everybody's ready, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Dawn, my colleague, who is going to start talking about access.
Hey everyone. Apologies for not being on camera for this brief time. I'm in the process of moving and there is no amount of background blur that can just hide the mess in my home office. So, you can listen to me. I will pull up our teaching resources site, which is something that has we are kind of transitioning to apply to institutional users of both Academic Writer and APA Style Manual. So I'm going to go ahead and uh, share that. Um, so let's see if I can move this so that I don't know if the Zoom bar like gets in the way. I don't know about these things. So hopefully you're seeing our teaching resources site right now. Just as a reminder, the URL for this is digitallearning.apa.org/teaching dash resources. I can go ahead and drop that in the chat so you have it. Um, and this is what we, for new customers, this is what we refer folks to. Everything you need to know to get started using Academic Writer. Um, and so, what I really want to talk about today is the access methods that you can use. Obviously, y'all already have access to Academic Writer, but I just wanted to talk about some of the kind of nuance and maybe some access methods that you haven't been using that may be more appropriate for your users now as they've become used to accessing Academic Writer, just putting it in more places. Um, so with institutional access to Academic Writer, there are a few different ways that you can use it. You're all probably obviously familiar with the IP authentication. This works best when you have a number of folks who are, we kind of traditionally think of this as being like your on-campus access. Um, IP authentication, does matter for other access methods like Open Athens and Proxy, though, where we do need to know the specific IP address for those access methods. Usually you get an Athens IP and then the IP for your proxy server, whether that is self-hosted or if it is something that OCLC hosts for you, we still need to know the IP for that proxy server, which is something whoever manages the proxy on your campus should have, or if you need to get it from OCLC, you can also do that. Um, so one of the things that I wanted to mention is the Open Athens access. So if you're not already using this and this has come to your campus recently, and I will say that we are noticing an increase of institutions that are using Open Athens. So we would just need some of those details in order to get that set up. Um, and we can look at what that looks like for users. One of the things to note for access for APA products, whether it's Academic Writer or APA Style Manual or APA databases on PsycNet, is that Open Athens works very similarly to Proxy, where it provides access to the platform, but is not additionally that APA account that your users need to create and save content in Academic Writer. I know that Open Athens does have kind of an identity management component, but APA platforms don't use that because the account that APA platforms use is, this sounds silly to say out loud now, is an APA account. And so that content is tied to that APA account. So when your users authenticate via Open Athens, it would be just like if they were on campus or using that proxy login where it's institutional credentials to get to the homepage in order to access any and browse any of the lessons and samples in the Learning Center. And then again, like those the on-campus and proxy access, logging into your individual APA account in order to create and save references and papers. Um, Moving on to proxy, the one thing I want to note, and we'll send out communication about this probably in the coming, I don't know, week or two, is that we have recently made an update to the proxy stanza so that all APA products, again, so that's going to be Academic Writer, APA Style Manual, as well as any databases you access on APA PsycNet are now all combined into one stanza. And this was at the, um, I want to say recommendation, but it was really more of kind of like a request and like you should be doing this from OCLC. So we worked really closely with them to update and test both on their side and our side the updated stanza. What this is going to do is help us better kind of, I don't want to say track, but give us better insight into um where user like aggregated, not individually, where aggregated users are clicking around in the Academic Writer platform in order for our developers to make it better for you and your users. Our developers are so incredibly data driven that if we can say we know that users don't click on this thing, or we know that users click on this thing a lot, we can give a specific number instead of just saying a lot. So by updating the stanza and getting that type of data, will only make the product better for you and your users. As soon as you are able to update that stanza, that would be great. If you have a hosted proxy, OCLC updates that in their weekly refresh. So you wouldn't necessarily need to worry about updating the stanza. Um, the last thing I want to mention, I do see there's some stuff going on in the chat, and I'll go have a look at that in a minute. I did just want to talk momentarily about the LTI integration. I know that I think just based on the attendee list, I think some of you are already using the LTI, but I wanted
Did we lose Dawn? I lost the
did
audio.
quizzes
Oh, there
in.
you are. Okay. Sorry. We lost your audio for just a minute.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
No,
What
it might be me. It might be me. Sorry.
did something cut out
It went
or?
out right after you introduced LTI integration.
Okay. Um, yeah, so just LTI, I know that some people are already using it. I think that with the release of the graded quizzes in the pl native to the platform, I think that this is also maybe if you're not already using LTI integration, a good opportunity to maybe reconsider that. And so LTI integration is going to be how you can add links to specific content. So add links to specific lessons that obviously include those graded quizzes in them to courses, right? So not necessarily, I mean, unless you are lucky enough to be a library that has a course and any sort of like, required like bibliographic instruction or something like that. But this is something that you can talk to your faculty and instructors about using across campus, right? And so they're not necessarily taking that very valuable classroom time in order to teach and assess on APA style. So if you have any questions about that, that information is here, and we have further additional information about kind of like those step by steps about how to get this integrated into your learning management system for the kind of, anywhere else, any learning management system should accept LTI integration. We'll work with you, on the big ones, Blackboard, Canvas, those types of things. But we can also attempt to help you for, other LMSs. But if you need the key and secret for that LTI integration, just reach out to us. Again, all of this information is on this teaching resources site, which I dropped the URL in the chat. But you can also just reach out to us in whatever your usual way is through support, and we're happy to help with that. Jana, was there anything else that you were expecting me to talk about that I did not?
Maybe the email lookup for off-campus access.
Yeah. Okay. So Jeff, to answer your question, Academic Writer LTI is currently 1.1. Um, and yes, I will go ahead and um show um the login options as your users might see them. Let me go ahead and reshare my screen. Uh, Okay. So with when users are not on campus or otherwise authenticated, with the LTI, that like includes the authentication piece. So your Open Athens login is here. If they get to the academic writer page without authenticating previously, they can always choose their institution from the drop down, and then log in that way. You can also post the Open Athens generated redirector URL to kind of skip this kind of process here, which would just take them directly to their Athens login page. Um, so depending on how your school kind of manages resources. Um, so the other thing that Jana had mentioned was the institutional email lookup. So we have found that this can be super helpful because for as much as we tell students to make sure that they're using their school link to Academic Writer, we know based on the questions that we're getting that they're not doing that. So when they get to Academic Writer and find that, they log into their account and it tells them the error message that they'll see is what we call the file cabinet, right? So that's like their list of papers, but tells them that they're not authenticated, and so they're only seeing this list instead of the writing center, or kind of like the academic writer platform content that they were expecting because they're not associated with their school subscription. So this institutional email lookup will send an email to, even if their APA, an academic writer account, is not using their institutional email address, though we do recommend that. Um, by providing that address, we can associate the email domain with our systems and send them a link to verify that they have access, and that they can use that, kind of like that tokenized link, that they will be sent. The link that they receive by email is only good for about, I think it's like 5 or 10 minutes. So it is very specific. And so, but once they're logged on, then the kind of regular, stay logged in as long as you're active in the product, rules kind of apply. So when I enter my email address here, um, it does say, because we can't necessarily share subscription information with everyone, the messaging here is that if your institution has access, we'll email you the link. And so I think that I am only sharing my application. You won't necessarily, let's see if I can change that. Let's see. Stop share. I'll share my desktop. Y'all can see my insane desktop. So we do get this message that, oh, okay, it looks like the link is good for 1 hour. So if there's any sort of delay in getting through your institutional firewalls or anything like that, that'll be good. And you get the access link. So if I wasn't logged in, I can use this link to do so. And you can see that so I'm not on like the APA VPN or anything. You could see that I didn't have access to Academic Writer. It has provided me with this link, and I am still not logged into my individual account. So this will just mimic if they were on campus. So kind of like that IP access, but is actually just provided through that tokenized link. So I think that this is really going to um, improve student access when they are maybe not necessarily following, like going through the library in the ways that they are supposed to, that we recommend, but still provides that. I'm using air quotes here that you obviously can't see, like that institutional access to the platform, to really cut down on obviously like the time that it would take for them to file a support case, but just to get them back into their papers and all of that. So I think this is going to be super helpful for students. Obviously, we still want to encourage everyone to use their institutional links through the library and all of that. But when they inevitably don't, This I think will be a really great benefit to them.
Jeff has a great question in the chat that I thought I'd let you handle.
Um, okay, if the person is no longer a role, the address will the user be directed and only the um I guess some of that depends on how long. So the question was about students who are no longer enrolled at an institution that still have institutional email. Um, I would guess that if they're still using, if they still have access to that institutional email inbox, that they would still get access. They, I will have to double check. 'Cause, I mean, I think some of that too depends on how quickly institutions cut off access to institutional email.
I'm really glad you answered because that was my impression of how it would work because they can put in the email address for their institution, but if they don't have access to that email address, they wouldn't be able to access the link that we send to them. So if they do have access to their email, institutional email that they're looking for the link for, then it would operate just as if they were on campus because we wouldn't maintain a enrollment status of students on our end. I think that that makes sense, right?
Yeah, I mean, again, yeah, it's just really whether or not the student has access to their institutional email, and if so, for how long.
Right.
Uh,
Does that
but
answer your question, Jeff? I noticed you dropped something else in the chat. I just wanted to give you a chance to ask it or
yeah,
clarify.
Jeff, that makes sense. Like, obviously, like once a student's no longer enrolled, that they wouldn't necessarily have access through the library. So I think then the things that Jana and I are talking about, in terms of their access to the inbox for their institutional email, um, would kind of apply after their library access is turned off. But if you have any other kind of questions or concerns about that, we can definitely discuss further.
Great. That was great. I think the whole institutional lookup is going to be really helpful for students. And we wanted to make sure everybody knew. So when I send out the link to the recording, I will go ahead and clarify some of that information for the people that couldn't attend.
Yeah, I think it'll be really great for I mean the librarians on this call who are probably also answering all of those questions about like why can't I log into Academic Writer? It's like because you didn't use your school link. But you know, it's like we also answer those questions from your users too, whether they did or did not ask you first. So I think that, you know, all in all, just like win-win for everyone, including the students who are able to get back to their papers sooner than having to go through like the whole like email or chat support process, either through their library or, you know, if they've emailed us. So we're pretty excited about that.
Great. I am going to talk a little bit about references. This popped into my head because I am working on a, a tutorial on how to import references into Academic Writer. And it made me realize as my video topic keeps expanding, do students always understand the type of reference they're looking at? How much am I educating them on references versus just importing references? So I thought it might be a good time to kind of review with you who the students would know or go to first, how we support students in learning about references and how we support them in building them in the platform. So within the Learning Center, I think the best place to think about starting is, do students recognize the type of reference that they're looking at? Do they realize that they're going to Google versus EBSCO or ProQuest or even PsycNet? And we have a tutorial how to find reliable sources that I think really helps students understand what a reference is, like where they're getting it from, what that even looks like. My computer is a little bit slow. So if we look at the overview for this particular tutorial, they kind of walk you through your planning stage, but also where do you find sources? What's the difference between scholarly research versus a Google search? How do you search? So it's kind of getting them started on understanding what a source is and how to get that into a reference management system, or even understand how to build a reference. The other tutorial that I thought would be really helpful for this is also the how to avoid plagiarism and self-plagiarism. If students understand a little bit more about citing sources and when they should be citing sources, they'll understand what references they need to capture when they're writing their paper. So those two, I think, would be really helpful in guiding students to understand and think about their sources and what does plagiarism mean? What does self-plagiarism mean? Why am I citing these sources? And those are a little bit higher level thinking about it. When we get into the quick guides, it's more about the mechanics of building those references. We do have the entire reference list section, which I think is great. Within this, we do have a couple that are a little bit more general for students and how to treat those. So as you scroll down, you'll find reference elements, which I think are really helpful. It kind of breaks down a reference, any type of reference, into the basic elements and what those are: the author, date, title, source, where do you find those? And then we also try to put in all the different cases that you would have, like newspaper article or magazine article. This is how you would do it. And these are all developed so that if the student's only accessing Academic Writer for the Learning Center and they're not managing references or writing papers in the platform, these are going to be really helpful in showing them how to build those references. The missing reference elements is another one that I thought was very general, but would help students identify if they are missing something that would fit into the 4 elements of the reference. So this whole section is great for helping students figure out how to build a reference. And again, within most of these, you will have a Learn More section, which will point students directly to an excerpt from the manual. So within that manual, it will cover it will add context to what they're learning in Academic Writer. So it comes up as a PDF, and then they can read more about it directly from that scan. The other thing is the embed link. So as a librarian, if you have LibGuides, you can always grab the embed link and use that to add it to your LibGuides. And it'll come out looking like this. A link, the image will be a link, and it will bring them into Academic Writer. You can always add in your proxy prefix to the URL. I personally am not totally sure where that would go, but I know there has to be someone that can help you with that part. But that's another way to sort of get around having to develop your own materials. When you have access to Academic Writer, you could always just link the students directly to one of the lessons when developing like an APA style guide. So that might also be helpful. And then with the LTI integration, you would have a whole menu of all the quick guides and tutorials that you could include in your LMS course, if that's also helpful. The other thing in the Learning Center I wanted to quickly show you are the manuscript sections. So within this, we have a section on the reference list. And so this is going to break down how you're building your reference list. This is an entire section of it. So it goes over what works you're including in the reference list, as well as how you're constructing those entries. And to go along with this one, in a completely different section, we have under paper format and organization, alphabetizing the reference list. So that might be something students struggle with, alphabetizing the entire list. If they're using Academic Writer, we're going to do that for them. But there's also a quick guide. So all of these learning elements are really helpful for students when they're not working in Academic Writer, but also when they are working. So it's great for them to have that basic knowledge of what is a reference list, why am I citing these sources, how am I building it. We have a lot in here. We also have over 200 sample references, which I think are really great. This would help students kind of browse these and figure out what type of reference they're actually looking at. I got this from, say, EBSCO, but what exactly is it that I'm looking at and how would I treat that? So if they are looking at a legal, like, oh, I need to cite an article of the US Constitution or any type of constitution. If you click on it, it's going to give you that example of what it would look like. But you can also click on the Learn More and it will take you directly to the reference form that you would use to build that particular type of reference. So if I click into article of a constitution, this student would be dropped into the form and they could start building that reference. And we give them lots of options. So if it's a state constitution or a non-US constitution, they can select one from here, or they can just do the entire US Constitution. And then we have the asterisks and the question marks to help them understand what they're putting in and why we need that. So the asterisk will always be required. But this is a great segue into the Reference Center itself. We give students two ways to build a reference, using one of our many forms, as well as importing references. And this got me to thinking about how do we help students understand the type of resource that they're looking at? Because we have so many different forms, and in some of the forms, there are special cases. So it's a little bit more helpful down here. If you look at like a TikTok video, it gives you two options for citing that. Or if you're using generative AI, we have a form for citing the chat versus citing the actual tool itself. And this comes from the most recent Style Expert guidance on how to cite AI. Most commonly, I think ChatGPT, most students would probably default to that, but this could be for any generative AI tool. But what I thought was really interesting is looking at a journal article and hoping students know to poke around. So if you're looking at a journal article for nursing students, they can cite from the UpToDate database here, and that would pull that in, and it would change the form so that they are they have the extra option of retrieval date. So I've been also working on hopefully developing a webinar in the fall specific to nursing and medicine. And so for this, when you're looking at up to date, even though it's a journal article, there can be updates to the article itself that you would then want to make sure you include the retrieval date. So if you do have a student and they come to you and they're like, I don't know how to cite this, you can use the form in one of the special cases. If I go back to just can I just go back to, I'm gonna X out of it. Because once you select a form, you're in that form. So if they've picked the wrong form, they will need to just go out of it and then come back to the form that they would actually need. In this case, as I scroll down, one of the things I wanted to note was that we have several special cases here that students might not always understand. So if it's an online only journal, they would be using article numbers. And if they don't realize what that means, they might not think to click on this or use that. And that was one of the things that I found won't import via the RAS files. So that's, I think all of this information has guided me to thinking about how to make my instructional video instructional. Like, let's think about references. So when you're importing, you can select your file origin type. So we have 3 main databases: PsycNet, EBSCO, ProQuest, and Ovid. So those will all be, their RAS files are in a slightly different order, but you do have common fields, which is why you have an RAS file in the first place. I don't know how many people are familiar with them, but I can give you a quick view. They look like total gibberish to me. But once you understand the codes, you can kind of pick out the information pretty quickly. This one's a journal. I have a million authors. I have a title. I have volume, issue, starting page, end page, publisher right here. And then a lot of keywords, which we don't import. And then I have my URL in my database. So it's a lot of information that we're pulling in. And Academic Writer won't change the information. We can't just update it for the students. So part of what I want to make the video about is to get them to think about how they can proofread their imported references. We can flag references when we know that it's a missing element, but when they import them and we can't flag it, I want them to kind of think about, how do I look at these and fix them? What am I missing? So when they go back to their list of references and they've just done an import, you would go to date, updated, newest, and that would pull in everything that you've worked on recently or imported. And you can see I have a number of exclamation points. I imported a podcast, it didn't give me my author. So these are all things that when we click in to edit the reference, Academic Writer will specifically tell them what they're missing. So they can quickly go back and say, okay, that didn't come through, let me put that in. Most of the time, students are going to be using a journal article, a book, maybe a dissertation. They're going to have references that import that won't have any special cases. But I want them to kind of think about what they're looking for in terms of this type of reference. So here I have dissertation abstracts. It's calling that out for me. Here I have my British Journal of Educational Psychology, and it did import with the advanced online publication already noted. So we're really good at trying to catch as many cases as we can, but we are limited to the RAS file format. So we can only import what's provided. So when I finally get into filming the instructional video, I will kind of go over some of the things I want the students to look at when proofreading their reference. This is just a quick general overview of how we have references structured and how students can kind of get guidance on these and quickly import references versus creating references. Does anybody have any questions? Stop share. It's also fine. There's a lot to go over. Aside from all the access mechanisms, and then just a quick review of references in Academic Writer. I'm really glad everybody joined. It's always helpful to touch base with people and kind of answer some questions and let you know some of the improvements that we've made to Academic Writer to help the users however we can. So yeah, the institutional lookup is going to be super helpful for off-campus access. I hope students are able to utilize that, and hopefully you get less questions about getting access. But I am pretty much at time. I scheduled this for 45 minutes because I didn't want to take too much time out of everybody's day. So unless you have any questions, I'll let you get back to it.
Looks
Have a
great.
great
Thank
day.
you.
You're welcome. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye, Jana.
Bye, Heidi.
Hi, Jenna. This
Hi,
is
Leah.
Leah.
How are
Yeah.
you?
I'm doing good. Do you have a few minutes?